Hi, I'm Lauretta Crites, and as promised, I am back today to show you how I colored in the heart for my Follow Your Heart mini quilt, like the one here, in real time. So some preparation that I did before this minute is I went ahead and tested out my colors. I always use the bottom edge of the fabric to check out the pencils that I'm going to use on any specific project. It's a great place to test them out, and it's on the same material as your mini quilt. So I really liked the general shading I did on this heart, but then I remembered I really wanted to leave myself a little highlight. So in this case today, what I did was take just a little scrap of freezer paper and I drew a crescent shape on it for that highlight. And then I cut it out and I pressed it to the surface of the mini quilt with a hot iron for about 2 seconds. That's going to stick on there and it's going to become a mask so that I don't have to remember to leave that highlight. I do a lot of my coloring when it's either late in the evening or I am in front of the TV, and it's very easy for me to forget what I had planned to do. So I find by doing a little thing like that, I just don't accidentally end up coloring over the area, and it just builds in that highlight for me. Now, I will scoot it out of my frame there. I will turn the work as I'm going because I find it's a lot easier to get smooth strokes if I'm not trying to fight the natural positioning of my hands. So you'll find I just keep moving things around and around so that as I color them, I'm working with the natural position. I'm using the edge of my pencil, not the tip, because I want a nice blending of the color. I don't really want hard lines. Here I just barely marked outside of my line. I will ignore that until the very, very end. To fix that up after I get the color all finished and all sealed, I'll take a white eraser and I will just erase that little bit right out of the fabric. So I'm coming up here kind of next to that little piece of freezer paper. So I'm going to color up next to it gently because I don't want to make a really, really hard ridge. I'll take that off later and I'll do a little more coloring around it, but I want it to be a soft transition for that highlight. So as I try to tell people, you know, you take your time. This is not something you want to rush out. Don't sit down and think that you're going to color your entire mini quilt in 15 minutes. It's probably not going to happen. Or if it does, it may not be the results that you're really after. Here I'm trying to kind of go up against that edge again, gently, and then blending the color back in. And I'm going to use about 3 different colored pencils for this. I'm going to start with a basic color that I'm laying over the entire surface. Then I will come back in with a little darker color. And then I have one more, and I can't quite decide, so I've set aside 2 colors. One is a little more red. So if I find that this whole thing is coming out a little too sort of pinky toned, then I will go over it again with a little bit of red to blend these colors in. And if I find that it just needs a little more pop of color, I also have a purple standing by. So we'll see where I want to head with it when I get to that part today. And on any given day, I may change my mind as to which color combination I want to use. My overall intention is to get a little bit darker on the outer edges, a little bit lighter on the inner areas, have a smooth color transition, and get enough color down that it's going to really read as red and not as pink. Like right now, I'd say it's reading very pink. I haven't gotten enough pigment worked into the fibers yet to really start getting it to read a more red. And I'm using a fairly firm pressure. Because it is fabric, it takes a little more work to get it into the tooth of the fabric than it would if it were paper. I'd certainly be done with this color if it were paper and ready to go on to the next. But because it's fabric, you really do have to go over it, working it into all the nooks and crannies of the fabric. So I've gotten my first layer pretty much laid down. Now I'm going to pick up a color that's a little bit darker. It's still a red, but it's just a little bit deeper tone. And I'm going to bring that in around the edges. And I'm probably also going to bring it up a little bit more in the base. So here at the bottom of the heart, I kind of want to give that a little bit of depth. So I'm going to bring that color up from the bottom a little bit more, so that that's sort of grounding that little heart. Let's see, different colored pencils. So this one happens to be a Rexel Cumberland. I use all kinds of different colored pencils. It just depends on which brand is the color I want it to be. I will work sometimes in little circles like I'm doing now because it's close to the edge and I want to try to make sure that I'm staying in, but also that I'm blending the shade, not getting a lot of harsh lines. So I think that's, you're really now starting to be able to see how that edge is building up in color. We're getting a little more depth there. These particular reds that I picked both had a little bit of a pinkier cast to them. This is Rexel Cumberland's Crimson Lake and Liqua Mark's Deep Red. So that's why I have a little bit more of a orangey red standing by, because I thought these could end up looking a little too purple. Or I may just decide I like that and I'm going to push the purple a little further by bringing in another purple tone. Try to come in real close to that little piece of freezer paper. And I think at this point I am about ready to go ahead and pull that off. I'll still have to work carefully around that spot, but I want to make sure that I can see how that's looking compared to everything else. So I have just a little pair of very sharp pointy scissors here. I'm going to lift that little piece of freezer paper off. There we go. So that's left a beautiful highlight for me. I don't see any real hard ridges, but I do want to kind of get this into a tiny bit more of a point. So I'm going to sharpen that up a little bit, work my way into the corner. And I've got a new mini quilt coming out to you guys with this month's newsletter. So that's fun stuff always. Okay. Now I'm thinking that looks pretty good, but I am wanting it to be a little more red. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up my bright red now, and I'm going to work over the whole thing. I've already given a little darker edge, so what I'm doing now is just blending both colors and giving it a little more of, like I said, moving it away from those purple tones and giving it a little more of a red tone. And I'm just going to go pretty much evenly over the whole thing, both directions. As I do this, I can start to see some beautiful kind of grain of the fabric coming in. Even though I've blended very smoothly, you can just still see the texture and the fiber. It's just lovely coming through the pencil color. So we're not losing that sort of grain that is just inherent in the weave of the fabric. So here, as I'm coming up against that highlight, I'm going to have to be careful that I don't move all the way into it. So you'll see I'm slowing down, touching that edge and moving back. And then continuing to get a nice smooth blending. I'm going to come through now with my red and just give it a wee bit more pop right on that very outside edge. Now this is probably sort of an 1/8 of an inch wide little definition that I'm adding just to that outside edge, just to really kind of drive that message home that this is red. And we are very close now. Circle my way up around the top. Okay, I think I am pretty happy with that. So there we go. A colored heart for our Follow Your Heart mini quilt. I hope that gave you a little bit more information on coloring in real time, and I'll be back with other demos. Keep checking on that newsletter, and I'll see you soon.